A millionaire leaves his wife for his mistress, and years later he sees her and her identical twins on a luxury cruise. Fatima al-Sharif is on her way to Sakaka City, her thoughts interrupted by a deep voice, smooth as velvet, that seemed to pull her from the trance she had fallen into. "I believe this is yours," the voice said, and Fatima turned, meeting the gaze of a man who seemed too perfect to be real. He was tall, his broad shoulders commanding, with eyes the color of the Mediterranean Sea, the kind of blue that held the weight of the world. His smile was disarming, the sort that could melt the ice of the Arctic in an instant. He held out a delicate lace handkerchief, and in that moment Fatima felt a rush of air leave her lungs. It wasn't her handkerchief, but somehow she would have sworn it was, if only to prolong this encounter. "Thank you," she managed to say, her fingers trembling as they took the handkerchief from him. Their eyes locked, and the world around them seemed to fade away. "I'm Omar al-Lede," he introduced himself, his voice sending shivers down her spine. "Diana al-Sharif," she replied, surprised at how easily her name slipped from her lips, as though the encounter was meant to be. Omar's smile deepened, and Fatima's heart skipped a beat. "Fatima," he repeated, savoring her name. "Would you care to dance?" Without waiting for her response, Omar gently took her hand and led her to the dance floor. The orchestra struck up a soft melody, and Fatima found herself swept into his embrace, moving effortlessly with him, as though their steps had been rehearsed in some distant, forgotten dream. Make sure to subscribe to my channel so I can continue bringing you more fascinating true stories like this one. And don't forget to watch this video till the end and like the video, because this story is going to be incredibly interesting. Please hit the like button to show your support. "I never believed in love at first sight," Kareem whispered, his lips brushing her ear as they danced. Fatima closed her eyes, allowing herself to be carried away by the rhythm of the music, the scent of sandalwood and leather that clung to his skin, and the warmth of his embrace. At that moment, she knew her life would never be the same again. Fate had woven its threads, bringing them together in a dance that promised passion, love, and though she didn't yet know it, a pain that would test the limits of her heart. The night passed, but for Fatima and Kareem, time seemed to stand still beneath the dimmed lights and the soft strains of a romantic tune. A new story was beginning, one that would shake the foundation of their life. Months later, Fatima stood before the mirror in a lavish wedding suite, adjusting the veil over her dark hair. Her reflection showed a woman transformed by love, her eyes sparkling with excitement and anticipation. "Are you ready, my dear?" her mother Khadija asked, her voice trembling with emotion. Fatima nodded, unable to speak, her heart beating so loudly she feared it might be heard through the bodice of her wedding gown. The aisle before her seemed endless, every step echoing in her ears as she walked down the path toward the grand cathedral. The guests stood as she passed, their whispers of admiration blending into a soft chorus. And there, at the end of the aisle, stood Omar. His adoring gaze made her knees tremble. When she finally reached him, he took her hands in his. "You are more beautiful than I ever imagined," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. The ceremony felt like a dream. Fatima barely heard the words spoken by the priest, so lost was she in Kareem's eyes, in the promises of a future together. "I, Kareem, take you, Fatima, as my lawful wife, to love and cherish you all the days of my life," he declared, his voice steady and resolute. When it was her turn, Fatima felt the words rise from the very core of her being. "I, Fatima, take you, Kareem, as my lawful husband, to love and honor you all the days of my life," she said, her voice trembling with emotion and devotion. The kiss that sealed their union was electric, passionate, full of silent promises. The applause of the guests seemed distant, as if Fatima and Karim were wrapped in their own bubble of happiness. The reception was a spectacle of opulence and grace. Champagne flowed like rivers of gold, music beckoned them to dance, and at the center of it all, Fatima and Omar stood radiant with joy as they glided across the dance floor. Fatima al-Sharif gazed into Omar Alad's eyes, her heart swelling with a joy so overwhelming it felt as though it might burst. "Are you happy, my love?" he asked, his voice a soft murmur as their first waltz as husband and wife continued. Fatima rested her head on his shoulder, her heart racing with the warmth of a love that seemed infinite. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied, her voice thick with emotion, as they spun around the elegant ballroom, the glow of the chandeliers reflecting in her eyes. She couldn't help but feel that she had reached the pinnacle of happiness. This was the life she had always dreamed of, a fairy tale that had come true, a future paved with endless possibilities. But deep within her, a small, quiet voice stirred, whispering a warning. Could something this perfect really last forever? She quickly pushed the thought aside, unwilling to let any hint of doubt spoil what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. As the evening wore on and the guests revelled in their joy, Fatima and Karim exchanged knowing glances, eager to begin their new life together. Little did they know, fate had a very different plan for them. This dreamlike night would soon turn out to be only the calm before the storm, threatening to unravel everything they had built. The honeymoon days passed quickly, like the fleeting foam of the sea, and life returned to its normal rhythm. Fatima, now Mrs. Al-Sayed, threw herself into her legal career with renewed passion, while Omar focused on expanding his business empire. At first, everything seemed perfect, but gradually, almost imperceptibly, things began to shift. One evening, Fatima prepared a special dinner, eagerly waiting for Omar to come home. It was already 9:30 p.m., and the meal she had carefully planned was growing cold on the table. Her phone buzzed with a text message, "I'll be late, don't wait up." A knot tightened in Fatima's stomach. This was the third time this week. She let out a heavy sigh, trying to calm the growing anxiety in her chest. When Omar finally came home, it was past midnight. Fatima feigned sleep, but she could hear him moving around the room, the soft rustling of his clothes as he changed, the unfamiliar scent of a perfume lingering in the air. The next morning, Fatima mustered the courage to confront him. "Omar, can we talk?" she asked, her voice wavering just slightly. He looked up from his phone, irritation flashing across his face. "Does it have to be now?" "I have an important meeting in half an hour," he replied dismissively. Fatima felt as though she had been slapped. "You always have an important meeting," she murmured. "What's happening to us, Omar?" "I barely see you, and when you're home, it feels like you're 1,000 miles away." Omar ran a hand through his hair, a sigh escaping his lips. "Fatima, please, I'm under a lot of pressure at work. This new merger is taking up all my time." "And what about us?" she asked, her voice cracking. "Our marriage," she pressed, tears threatening to spill. "Don't start with the drama, Fatima," Omar snapped, his tone harsh. "You know how important this business is to me, to our future." Fatima recoiled, the words hitting her like a physical blow. "Drama? Is that what you think of my concern for our marriage?" Omar glanced at his watch and groaned. "I don't have time for this now. We'll talk when I get back." Without another word, he grabbed his briefcase and left, leaving Fatima alone with her swirling thoughts and mounting fears. That night, lying in their empty bed, Fatima couldn't hold back the tears. Where was the man she had fallen in love with, the one who used to look at her like she was the only woman in the world? Doubt crept into her mind like a poisonous shadow. Her phone buzzed again. It was from Omar. "Don't wait up. I need to stay at the office all night." Fatima clutched the phone to her chest, a sob escaping her lips. The distance between them seemed to grow with each passing day, and she had no idea how to stop it. As she stared out the window at the lights of the city, which once had seemed full of promise, Fatima couldn't help but wonder what secret Karim was hiding. Would she have the courage to face the truth when it was finally exposed? The night stretched before Fatima, long and solitary, filled with unspoken questions and fears she refused to confront. Little did she know, this was just the beginning of a storm that threatened to shatter everything she thought she knew about her life and her love. Days turned into weeks, and Fatima's suspicions grew like a looming shadow, darker and more threatening with each passing moment. One afternoon, as she was preparing Karim's suit for the dry cleaner, her fingers brushed against something in the inner pocket. Her heart raced wildly as she pulled out a small folded piece of paper. She opened it, and in that instant the world she knew crumbled to pieces. It was a note, written in delicate, flowing handwriting. "Last night was amazing. I can't wait to see you again. With love, Jay." Fatima's hands trembled uncontrollably, her mind refusing to process the words her eyes had seen. But there it was, an undeniable proof of Karim's betrayal, as if fate itself were mocking her. At that very moment, the door creaked open. Omar entered, loosening his tie. "Fatima," he stopped dead in his tracks, his eyes landing on his wife, standing in the middle of the room, the note clutched in her hand, tears streaming down her cheeks. "What is this?" Fatima's voice was barely a whisper, trembling with pain and disbelief. Karim's face drained of color as he stared at the paper in her hand. "Fatima, I can explain," he stammered. "Explain what?" Fatima's voice cracked, her initial shock quickly turning to anger. "Explain how you've been lying to me, how you've betrayed our marriage?" Omar took a step toward her, but Fatima recoiled as if his presence burned her. "Please, Fatima, listen to me. Things aren't what they seem." "Oh, they're not?" Fatima let out a bitter laugh. "Then you haven't been sleeping with another woman? You haven't been breaking every promise you made to me?" Omar fell silent, his failure to respond speaking louder than any words. The ground beneath Fatima felt like it was splitting open. "Who is she?" Fatima asked, her voice shaking, though part of her already knew the answer. Omar closed his eyes, defeated. "Aisha, my assistant." The name hit Fatima like a heavy blow. Aisha, the young, beautiful assistant that Karim had hired just a few months ago, the same one who always smiled too brightly whenever Fatima visited the office. "Please, Fatima," Karim began, but she cut him off. "How long, Omar?" she shouted, throwing the crumpled note at him. 3 months, he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. Fatima felt the air leave her lungs. 3 months? While I was fighting for our marriage, trying to reconnect with you, you were in another woman's arms. "I want you to leave," Fatima said, her voice icy and detached. "Right now. I don't want to see you." "Fatima, please, we can fix this. I love you. It was a mistake." "Out!" Fatima screamed, the tears blurring her vision. "If you ever loved me, if there's any decency left in you, you'll leave now." Omar looked at her, a mix of guilt and resignation in his eyes. He picked up his briefcase and, without saying another word, walked out the door. The deafening silence that followed felt suffocating. Fatima crumpled to the floor, sobbing, racking her body. Her perfect world, her fairy tale love, had shattered in a matter of minutes. As the night descended over Sakaka, Fatima sat there on the floor of their apartment, wondering how she would survive this betrayal, how she would rebuild her life from the ashes of her marriage. What she didn't know was that this painful revelation was only the beginning of a journey that would lead her to the deepest depths of sorrow, but also to heights of strength she never thought she could possess. The days that followed passed in a haze of grief and confusion for Fatima. The apartment, once filled with laughter and love, now felt like a mausoleum of broken memories. Every corner reminded her of Omar, of the life they had shared, and the promises that had now turned to dust. The doorbell rang, snapping Fatima al-Sharif out of her numb state. She dragged herself to the door and opened it to find Zainab, her best friend since university, her face etched with shock as she took in the sight of Fatima. "Oh my God, Fatima, what have you done to yourself?" Zainab whispered, rushing inside. Fatima looked at herself as though seeing her reflection for the first time in weeks. Her hair was tangled. She wore the same clothes from days ago, and her face was streaked with dried tears. "He left," Fatima's voice cracked, rough from neglect. "He left me for her." Zainab embraced her tightly, and Fatima collapsed into her arms, sobs racking her fragile body. "I know, darling, I know," Zainab whispered gently, stroking her hair. "But you can't keep living like this." Fatima pulled away from Zainab, her spirit visibly breaking. Her eyes were empty, hollow. "So what?" Fatima's voice was barely a whisper, tinged with hopelessness. "I have nothing left. Karim was my life, my future." "No," Zainab said, staring at her with unwavering eyes. "She's still here, buried under all this pain, but she's still here, and we're going to bring her back." With a calm yet unwavering grip, Zainab guided Fatima toward the bathroom. "First a shower," she insisted. "Then we'll eat, and after that, we'll talk." Fatima, too exhausted to fight, let herself be led. The warm water from the shower hit her skin like a rebirth. It washed away the grime, but more importantly, it softened the ache inside her. By the time they sat down to eat the soup Zainab had prepared, Fatima felt the stirrings of something she thought was long gone, a flicker of life that she had thought had been extinguished forever. "I don't know how to go on, Zainab," Fatima confessed, her voice shaky. "Every corner of this place, every moment of my day, everything reminds me of him." Zainab reached out, taking her hand in hers. "Maybe it's time for a change," she suggested, "a new beginning." "A new beginning," Fatima repeated, the words echoing in her mind. The idea felt both terrifying and liberating at once. "Yes," Zainab continued, "a new apartment, maybe a new job, something that's just yours, without the shadow of Omar hanging over you." Fatima glanced around the room, where the once happy memories now felt bitter and tainted. For the first time in months, she felt a hint of hope stirring in her chest. "Maybe you're right," she murmured. Zainab smiled, her face softening as she saw a glimmer of the old Fatima returning. "Of course I am, and I'll be with you every step of the way." As the evening drew on and the city lights of Sakaka glittered outside, Fatima felt a subtle shift inside her. The pain was still there, raw and deep, but it didn't overwhelm her completely anymore. With Zainab's support, maybe, just maybe, she could find the strength to rebuild her life. Little did Fatima know, fate had much larger plans in store for her, plans that would lead her on a path of self-discovery, strength, and ultimately, a twist of destiny that would change everything. As the weeks passed, Fatima slowly began to piece her life back together. With Zainab's help, she found a new apartment and began entertaining offers from law firms. Though the pain lingered, it no longer paralyzed her. One morning, as she was preparing for an interview, a sudden wave of nausea hit her, rushing her to the bathroom. After rinsing her mouth, a horrifying thought crossed her mind. With trembling hands, she reached into the bathroom cabinet and pulled out a pregnancy test, one she had bought months earlier, when she still dreamed of starting a family with Omar. The wait for the result felt like an eternity. Fatima paced back and forth in the small bathroom, her heart pounding. When she finally looked at the result, time seemed to freeze. It was positive. No, this can't be, she whispered, dropping to the floor, still holding the test in her hands. Her hands shook as she dialed Zainab's number. "Zainab, are you okay?" Zainab's worried voice came through. "I'm pregnant," Fatima managed to say, her voice cracking. "What? Are you sure?" Zainab gasped. "I just took the test. It's positive," Fatima whispered, the first tears beginning to fall. "I'm coming over right now," Zainab said quickly, hanging up the phone. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours before Zainab finally arrived. Fatima rushed to the door, collapsing into her arms. "Oh, Fatima," Zainab whispered, hugging her tightly. They sat on the couch, Fatima still trembling. "What am I going to do, Zainab?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "I was starting to rebuild my life, and now this." Zainab gently held her hands. "Fatima, listen to me. This is not the end of the world. I know it's scary, but you're the strongest woman I know. You can do this." "But what about Karim?" Fatima asked, the name leaving a bitter taste in her mouth. "Should I tell him?" Zainab frowned. "That's your decision, Fatima. But think about you first. What do you want?" Fatima put a hand over her mouth, feeling a mix of fear and something else. Hope, perhaps, stirring within her. "I don't know," she admitted. "Everything is so confusing, but a part of me already loves this baby." Zainab smiled softly. "Then there's your answer." Fatima looked at her, her eyes full of tears, but also something new, a quiet resolve. "You're right. This baby is mine. My chance to love unconditionally, to create the family I always wanted." "And Omar?" Zainab asked carefully. Fatima took a deep breath. "For now, he doesn't need to know. This baby is mine, Zainab. It's my reason to keep going, to be stronger." Zainab hugged her again, holding her close as the weight of the moment settled in. "I'm so proud of you, Fatima, and I'll be with you every step of the way." As the afternoon sunlight streamed through the window, Fatima al-Sharif felt something shift within her. The fear was still there, but now it was accompanied by a strength she hadn't known she possessed. This baby, this new life growing inside her, was an unexpected gift from fate. What Fatima didn't yet realize was that this discovery would not only change her life, but lead her down a path filled with challenges, joys and surprises she could never have imagined. The future, once so uncertain and frightening, now shimmered with a new light of hope and possibilities. The days that followed were a whirlwind for Fatima. Every morning she woke up with a sense of determination, placing a hand on her growing belly as if reminding herself of the strength she had discovered. With each passing day, she felt more certain that she had made the right decision. The future, once uncertain, now seemed to be brimming with new possibilities. The next chapter of her journey began with an unexpected call. One spring morning, as she prepared breakfast for her 5-year-old twins, Fatima received a call that would change her life once more. "Fatima al-Sharif," a deep voice on the other end of the line asked. Fatima adjusted the phone between her shoulder and ear as she poured cereal into 2 small bowls. "Yes, this is Fatima," she replied, her voice steady but filled with a hint of surprise. "This is James Thompson, senior partner at Sun & Associates in Dubai. We've been following your career with great interest, and we'd like to offer you a position at our firm." Fatima nearly dropped the cereal box in shock. Thompson & Associates was one of the most prestigious law firms in the country. This opportunity could elevate her career to heights she had never imagined. "It's an honor, Mr. Thompson," Fatima stammered, her voice trembling with both excitement and disbelief. James Thompson paused before replying. "We admire your determination, especially considering your situation. It's not every day we come across someone with your resilience. We'd be happy to work around your schedule. How about you come to Dubai next week to discuss the details?" Fatima glanced across the kitchen at her 5-year-old twins, who were playing noisily at the table, their laughter filling the air with innocence. They were unaware that a single conversation might completely alter the course of their lives. She swallowed hard, her voice shaky as she responded, I need to think about it. Can I give you an answer in a couple of days?" "Of course, Miss al-Sharif. Take your time," came the reassuring reply. "We'll be waiting for your call." As Fatima hung up, her hands trembled slightly. She sat down at the kitchen table, her gaze fixed on her children, but her mind swirling with thoughts of what this offer meant for her and for them. The opportunity of a lifetime was in her grasp, but it came with the cost of uprooting her children from everything they knew. It was a dream every lawyer would envy, working with one of the most prestigious firms in the world, but it felt like a far-off fantasy. "Mama, are you okay?" Leah's voice cut through her reverie. Fatima looked into her daughter's big brown eyes, full of concern. "I'm fine, sweetheart," Fatima replied, offering a forced smile. "Mama's just thinking about something important." "Is it something good or bad?" Hassan joined the conversation, his usual curiosity piqued. Fatima pulled them both into an embrace, her heart torn. She pressed her lips to their foreheads and whispered, "I don't know yet, my loves. But no matter what, we'll always be together." Later that evening, after putting the children to bed, Fatima picked up the phone again. This time it was Zainab on the other end, her voice laced with excitement. "Dubai!" Salma exclaimed, the excitement barely contained. "That's amazing!" "I know," Fatima said quietly, her excitement mingled with doubt. "But the kids, Zainab, should I even be considering this? Am I being selfish?" Salma's voice softened, turning serious. "Fatima, listen to me. You've sacrificed so much for them. You've given everything for those kids. Maybe it's time for you to do something for yourself. Think about the future you could offer them. Think about what this could mean for them." Fatima fell silent, her mind racing. Salma's words echoed in her mind as she weighed her options. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she spoke again, her decision made. "You're right," Fatima said with newfound resolve. "I'll go to Dubai. I'll see what they have to offer." As she hung up the phone, Fatima felt a mixture of emotions flood her. There was excitement, yes, but there was also fear. She was about to make a choice that would change everything for her family. What she didn't realize was that this decision wouldn't just affect her career. It would also lead her back to a past she thought she had left behind, a past that would force her to confront ghosts she had buried long ago. The future was full of surprises, some that would test her strength, and others that would bring joy she hadn't dared to imagine. The sun blazed high in the sky as the luxury cruise ship sailed gracefully over the sparkling waters of the Arabian Sea. Fatima stood on the upper deck, her hands resting on the railing, inhaling the salty air with a deep sigh. The ship cut through the waves, the gentle rocking of the boat calming her restless mind, if only for a moment. "Mama, look!" Lila shouted, pointing out toward the horizon. "Dolphins!" Fatima smiled, her heart warming as she watched the dolphins leap and play in the water. She pulled Lila into a hug, pressing her cheek against her daughter's. "Aren't they beautiful?" Fatima asked softly. "Can we swim with them?" Hassan, always the adventurous one, asked, his wide eyes filled with wonder. "Maybe another time, darling," Fatima replied, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. "But how about we explore the ship instead?" Excited, the twins eagerly followed her, pulling her along as they headed inside the ship to see what adventures awaited. But as they moved deeper into the opulent halls of the cruise ship, Fatima couldn't shake the feeling of guilt that gnawed at her. This trip was supposed to be a reward for them, a chance to celebrate the big move to Dubai, but it was also a way for Fatima to escape the overwhelming thoughts and doubts that had taken root in her mind. As they wandered deeper into the ship, Fatima couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed in the past few months. The job with Thompson and Associates had been challenging and fulfilling, but it was also exhausting. Moving to a new city with 2 small children had felt like an emotional roller coaster. "Look, Mama, a giant pool," Hassan exclaimed, snapping her out of her thoughts. "Do you want to go swim?" Amina asked, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Fatima hesitated for a moment, then nodded, offering them both a smile. "Let's go," she said, knowing that despite the fear and uncertainty that weighed on her, this moment, this small, simple joy, was worth it. As Fatima and the twins made their way toward the pool, the excitement in the air was palpable. The children's laughter echoed around the ship, a sound so pure and innocent, it almost made Fatima forget the weight of her thoughts for a moment. The gentle sound of water splashing and the soft breeze of the Arabian Sea helped ease the tension in her chest, even if it was only temporary. They reached the pool, and the twins eagerly climbed in, splashing around happily. Fatima sat by the edge, her feet dipping into the cool water, watching her children with a smile that she hadn't worn in months. For the first time in a while, she allowed herself to just be in the moment. But as she glanced across the pool, something caught her eye. A man, sitting at the bar near the pool, looked up as if sensing her gaze. Fatima's heart skipped a beat. It was Omar. Time seemed to freeze. The bustling sound of the ship around her disappeared. The world narrowed down to just the 2 of them. She stood there for a moment, unable to move as her past. The man who once was everything to her stared back at her with a mix of surprise, confusion, and something else she couldn't place. Her children, oblivious to the tension, continued to play in the pool, their joyous laughter filling the air. But Fatima's heart was racing, her hands gripping the edge of the pool for support. She turned to the twins, her voice calm but trembling. "Kids, why don't you go check out the pool up close?" "Stay where I can see you," she said, her gaze never leaving Omar. Amina and Hassan, as excited as ever, didn't question her. They eagerly sprinted toward the pool, leaving Fatima alone with Omar. She took a deep breath, her emotions a whirlwind of confusion, anger, and lingering sadness. She walked slowly toward him, her steps deliberate, each one echoing in her ears. As she reached him, he stood, clearly unsure of how to approach her. His gaze flickered between Fatima and the children playing nearby, as if trying to gauge the situation. "Omar," Fatima said softly, surprised at how calm her voice sounded, considering the storm raging inside her. "Fatima," he replied, his voice thick with surprise. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Neither did I," she said, her words carrying a subtle firmness. Her eyes remained steady, though her heart was battling with a million emotions. Are they yours?" Omar asked hesitantly, his gaze shifting to the children in the pool. Fatima's heart sank. "Yes, they're mine," she replied, her voice filled with a quiet strength. A sudden realization seemed to hit Omar. His face paled, his eyes widened as he processed the information. "5?" he asked, his voice trembling as the truth slowly dawned on him. "Yes, 5, Fatima confirmed. "They're your children, Omar." The silence between them was deafening. Omar's gaze moved from Fatima to the children, disbelief written all over his face. He seemed to be struggling with the enormity of the revelation. Before Fatima could fully process what was happening, Laila and Hassan came rushing over. "Mama, can we go to the pool now?" Hassan asked eagerly, his excitement palpable. Fatima forced a smile, trying to mask the tumult of emotions swirling inside her. "In a moment, sweetie," she said, her voice strained but calm. "Mama's talking to an old friend." Omar, standing still and watching the children, whispered, "They're beautiful." Laila, always the more curious of the two, eyed Omar with suspicion. "Who are you?" she asked innocently. Fatima's heart skipped a beat. This was the moment she had feared for years, the moment when her children would finally meet the man who had once been their father, but had disappeared from their lives without explanation. Fatima quickly composed herself. "Kids," she said gently, her voice steady but soft. "This is Omar. He's an old friend of mine." Omar nodded in acknowledgement, trying to hide the emotions he couldn't control. "It's a pleasure to meet you both," he said, his voice thick with emotion. The twins smiled at him, unaware of the complex web of emotions at play. Hassan, ever the friendly one, bounced over to Omar. "Do you want to swim with us?" he asked. Before Omar could respond, a voice called out from behind them, "Omar!" It was Aisha. Fatima recognized her voice immediately. Aisha stepped into view, her eyes locking on the scene before her. She froze. Fatima could see the moment of realization hit her, the quiet recognition of what was happening. Aisha's voice was barely audible as she whispered, "Fatima." Aisha's gaze shifted to the children, her face pale as she pieced together the truth. The air around them grew tense, thick with unspoken words and emotions. Fatima could feel her world starting to spin, the past colliding violently with the present. "I think we have a lot to talk about," Omar said quietly, breaking the silence. Fatima glanced at her children, who were still oblivious to the growing tension. She turned back to Omar and Aisha, her voice steady, but filled with the weight of years of hidden truths. "I think it's time we all know the truth," she said, her words carrying the weight of unresolved pain and years of lies. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a golden and pink hue across the horizon, Fatima realized that this wasn't just a cruise through the Arabian Gulf. This was a journey into the past, a confrontation with buried truths, and perhaps the beginning of something entirely new. What Fatima didn't yet know was that the revelations to come would shake the very foundation of everything she thought she knew about her past, her present, and her future. Fate had drawn these four wounded souls together in the middle of the sea, and the waves of change that loomed on the horizon promised to be as powerful as the ones surrounding the ship. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, its golden rays casting long shadows over the sparkling waters, the atmosphere between Fatima, Omar, Aisha, and the children was thick with unspoken words and emotions. The tension that hung in the air was palpable, each person seemingly waiting for the right moment to speak, to break the silence that had held them captive for so long. Fatima felt her heart racing. She had no idea what was to come, but she could feel the weight of the moment in her bones. This wasn't just a family vacation or a chance for the children to meet their father. No, this was something much bigger, something that would forever alter the course of her life and her family's future. The moment stretched on as the ship glided through the calm waters, each wave a reflection of the turmoil in her heart. Omar stood across from her, his eyes filled with a mix of regret and longing, while Aisha, standing beside him, seemed to be struggling with the weight of her own guilt. Finally, it was Fatima who broke the silence. "We need to talk," she said softly, her voice steady, but carrying the weight of years of unresolved pain. Omar looked at her, his gaze searching. "Fatima, I know I've made mistakes, but I want to make things right. I need to be a part of their lives. I need to be a part of yours." His voice trembled, though he tried to keep his composure. Fatima's heart clenched as she looked at the children, their innocence shining through in the way they played, unaware of the storm that was brewing around them. She had protected them from so much, but now it seemed the past was finally catching up with them all. "You're not the only one who's been hurt, Omar," Fatima said, her voice rising slightly. "You left us. You walked away, and for years I carried the weight of that. You think you can just come back into our lives because you feel guilty. It doesn't work that way." Aisha stepped forward, her voice soft but firm. "Fatima, I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I never meant for any of this to happen. No," Fatima cut her off. "This is about them. This is about our children. They deserve to know the truth. They deserve to know who their father is, and I deserve to know what the hell happened between us, Omar." The tension in the air was suffocating as Fatima turned back to face Omar. "You think you can just waltz back into my life after everything? I've built a life without you, Omar. A life that was hard, yes, but it was mine, and I've done it alone. So don't you dare come here now and tell me that you've changed." Omar's face fell, the realization of what he had done hitting him harder than any words ever could. He took a step forward, but Fatima held up a hand, stopping him in his tracks. "Don't," she said, her voice breaking. "You've taken everything from me, Omar. Our family, our future. And now you want to waltz in and fix it. What do you expect from me? To just forgive you? To act like nothing happened?" The words hung heavy in the air. For a moment, there was only silence, broken by the sound of the waves gently crashing against the sides of the ship. Omar stood frozen, unable to answer her. Aisha, too, remained silent, her guilt a tangible presence between them. Fatima took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "I don't know what the future holds, but I know that I need to protect my children. I will always protect them, and if you want to be a part of their lives, you'll have to earn it. I won't make it easy for you, Omar. You have to prove to me that you deserve it." Omar nodded, his face filled with regret. "I will. I'll do whatever it takes." But as Fatima looked at him, something inside her knew that the road ahead would not be easy. There were so many layers to unravel, so many wounds to heal, and she wasn't sure if she was ready to take that journey with him, or if she even wanted to. As the night began to fall, and the ship continued its voyage through the darkened waters, Fatima made a silent promise to herself and her children. She would not allow her past to define her. She would move forward, no matter how difficult it might be, and no matter what happened, she would ensure that her children would never have to suffer the way she had. This moment, this encounter with Omar and Aisha, was just the beginning of a new chapter. The future, once uncertain, now shimmered with a faint but undeniable sense of hope. Fatima al-Sharif had faced her past, and though the journey ahead was still uncertain, she was ready to navigate it with strength and resilience. As the ship sailed through the night, the flickering lights of the distant shore were like tiny sparks of hope in the vast, dark expanse of the ocean. Fatima stood by the railing, her hands gripping the cold metal, her mind a swirl of thoughts. The past few days had been a whirlwind of emotions, each moment bringing her closer to confronting the truth she had spent so long trying to ignore. Her thoughts drifted back to the children, to Amina and Hassan. They were her world now, her everything. They were the reason she had pushed through the darkness, the reason she had rebuilt herself after the devastating blow of betrayal. And now, as she stood on the precipice of a new beginning, she knew that nothing would be more important than protecting them. "Are you okay?" Zainab's voice broke through the silence. Fatima turned to find her best friend standing beside her, her face filled with concern. Fatima nodded slowly, trying to force a smile. "I'm fine. Just thinking." Zainab didn't say anything for a moment, simply standing next to her in silence, her presence a steady comfort. Finally, Zainab spoke again, her voice soft but knowing. "You've been through so much, Fatima. I can't even imagine how hard it must be. But I see you every day growing stronger. You're doing it. You're living for yourself and for them." Fatima took a deep breath, her chest heavy. I'm not sure I'm doing it right, Zainab. The past is haunting me, and I can't seem to escape it. But I know one thing. I'm not going to let it dictate my future anymore. Zainab smiled gently, reaching out to squeeze her hand. And you won't. You're stronger than anyone realizes. They stood together for a while, the soft sound of the waves lapping against the ship's side, the only sound accompanying their thoughts. In the distance, Fatima could see the lights of a new city, Dubai, gleaming like a beacon of promise on the horizon. It felt surreal, like a new chapter was unfolding before her, one that was both terrifying and exhilarating. But Fatima knew that with each step she took, she was shedding her old self, her old life. She would face the challenges ahead with the same strength she had always carried, even when she felt broken. And with Zainab by her side, there was no doubt in her mind that she could do it. The following days aboard the cruise passed quickly, filled with the laughter of the children and the tense but necessary conversations with Omar and Aisha. They had all agreed to take things slow, to allow the children time to adjust to their newfound relationship with their father. But as each day passed, the weight of the past seemed to lift ever so slightly, replaced by a tentative hope for the future. One evening, as they all sat together for dinner, Aisha turned to Fatima, her expression more open than it had been before. "Fatima, I know we've had our differences," Aisha began, her voice trembling slightly, "and I know I've hurt you more than I can ever truly apologize for. But I want you to know that I never meant for any of this to happen. I never meant to cause you pain." Fatima looked at her, the years of resentment and anger still fresh in her mind. But there was something in Aisha's eyes now, something vulnerable, that made her pause. "I don't know what to say, Aisha," Fatima replied, her voice soft. "I'm still angry, I'm still hurt, but I'm trying. For the sake of the children, I'll try." Aisha nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "Thank you. That means more than you'll ever know." The evening wore on, and Fatima found herself feeling something she hadn't expected. Peace. Not complete peace, not yet, but a sense of progress, of moving forward. As the cruise neared its end, Fatima's heart raced. She had faced the ghosts of her past, had navigated the turbulent waters of betrayal and heartbreak. But now, as the ship docked in Dubai, she stood at the edge of a new life, one filled with uncertainty, but also with infinite possibilities. Fatima gathered the children in her arms, their laughter filling her ears. She had no idea what the future held, but one thing was clear: she would face it, no matter what. She had come so far, and she wasn't about to stop now. As they disembarked from the ship and stepped onto the bustling streets of Dubai, Fatima felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She was starting a new chapter, not just for herself, but for her children too. The pain of the past would always be a part of her, but it would not define her future. And as she walked into the unknown with her children by her side, Fatima knew one thing for certain. No matter what came next, she would face it with strength, resilience, and the unshakable love of a mother.